So you can have 4 different types of dynamic processors, and they can be on or off for each input, and you can make independent settings within that for each input. So for example, on input A, we could have the threshold like this, C, the threshold like this. They can all have different settings. They all must be compressors or any one of those 4 that we can select right here. So in other words, if you're setting up compression, then you can't have compression on 1 and then a de-esser on, I keep on calling these 1 through 8. They're A through H. So on A, you can't have a compressor here and then change this one to being, say, a noise suppressor. Whenever you select the type, then that is whatever that effect is across all of your inputs. So let me just put that back to compressor, and you can see right here, they can have different settings per input. In other words, some can be on, some can be off, and then you can change the threshold or in the ratio and anything like that. That can be independent for these guys, but they all need to share the same effect type. Does that make sense? Okay, so moving on to the other effects, we have 2 main categories of them, and that is your guitar effects and your send effects. You can toggle between that on the F1. We'll look at guitar effects right now, as the send effects is they're kind of more used when we're mixing all our tracks together later on. So in the guitar effects here, we have 4 choices right here. We have noise suppressor, amp simulator, compressor, and effect. We'll look at each one right here. So noise suppressor is just like we saw in the dynamic effects just a moment ago. Amp simulator here allows you to run your guitar through some cool cabinets, with things like, I need to turn that on. And then you can go through different cabinets, amount of gain, and give some overdrive and things like that. The compressor, we've seen that before. The effect is kind of like a virtual pedal board with a phaser, flanger, chorus, a tremolo, auto wah, and delay. Lots of very cool effects that you can drop across any track you want, either when you record or when you play back a track. Now, here's the deal with that choice. You have one guitar effect processor. If you set it up for recording, then you can use that effect over and over again, like record an overdriven guitar on track 1, set it to, a chorus, and record a chorus guitar on track 2, a flange guitar on track 3, and so on and so on. It's really no different when you think about it than connecting up one of those multi-effect pedal boards in line with the guitar and then selecting a different effect every time you record your guitar. You have one effect processor, but you can use it in different ways every time you record on every track you record. That's what it means here when you set your position of either record or play. Just select a track, turn this guy on, and then cursor over here, and then you can decide whether you want to apply this effect as you record or select a track that has already been recorded and apply it across that track on playback. Clearly, if you set it to record, then that effect is married to that performance forever. You can't pull that effect off as it was recorded with that effect. That makes sense, right? Set the guitar effect to the playback position, however, and then you can turn that effect on and off as you please. Basically, the pros and cons are these. If you want to use it again and again and again, then set it to record and change up the settings as much as you want. Maybe make it a flanger on track 1, an overdriven amp simulator on track 2. Basically whatever you want. But you better be happy with the result because they are fused together. On mixdown also, you can use this guitar effect to affect one track, and the benefit of that is that then you can tweak that effect all the way down to mixdown because it's affecting the playback of that track. I kind of feel like I've been doing this to death, but there's also one other caveat to the effects section. If you go back to dynamics here and try to add another dynamic processor, you'll get a message like this: not available, turn off the guitar effects or use 2 or less dynamics effects. Well, I want to use more than 2 dynamic effects. So let's go back and go back into here and we'll turn this off and then we should be good to go. Let's go back into dynamics and try to turn on C and we're getting it again. what's the deal? Well, here's the trick. We'll go back to effects here, and you'll note that the guitar effect is turned off, but here's the trick. You gotta have nothing selected down here. Now, if you go back to dynamics and go back to C, you better turn them on. In fact, you better do that to all of these guys right there. So once we go back into our guitar effects, and even though it's off, you won't be able to add any more than 2 dynamics processors unless you make sure that these selects, none of them are selected. Once they're not selected and that's turned off, you can go back and assign as many of these dynamic processors as you like. It seems like the guitar effects processor and the dynamics processors share kind of the same horsepower. So sometimes you might get a message to turn one of those guys off. In fact, you'll get that same message back in the guitar effects processor now that you have all of those dynamic processors on. Just follow the prompts and you'll be good to go. So there you have it. We have several effects that we can use as we record. The dynamics that has the compressors, noise suppressors, de-esser, and exciter that are applied across the inputs. Then the single guitar effects processor that can be applied on the recording of any track over and over again, or on the playback of a single track at mixdown. And then also the send effect. Okay, so pop quiz. How many tracks does the DP-24 have? It's actually a trick question because the standard answer is 24, but let's take a closer look. What would you say if I told you there was actually 8 virtual tracks under each physical track here? Think of them as alternate takes. So in the scenario of my